turnout is amazing and really speaks to Dad's charismatic and outgoing personality. He had wonderful friendships and interactions with so many people. He was also an exceptional artist, a respected captain at the Blue and Gold, and a dedicated steward of this town's history. I know that all of us are proud to have known him. I want to share a memory of him that I think will resonate with anyone who knew him or even met him briefly. When I was about 12, we were crossing the street, and this woman in front of us fell down. It was very sudden. Thankfully, she was not hurt, but before I could even process what had happened, Dad was already helping her back up, asking if she was all right, and then finished helping her across the street. He stayed with her for several minutes on the sidewalk while she collected herself. Throughout this whole process, he was calm, collected, and exuded a gentle kindness. At that age, I found everything he did to be embarrassing. But that day, I could not have been more proud that he was my dad. As a young man, I did not think about how that was a teaching moment. But as I have grown, I realized that he was showing me all the values needed for a successful life. He was showing me compassion, kindness, leadership, and a willingness to help a stranger with no expectation of reward or praise. My sister and I have heard numerous stories about our father over the past few days, and in all of them, those same values were present. So, at least for me, that story encapsulates the traits that made him a wonderful father and a wonderful friend to so many. I know we will all continue to feel his loss in our own ways. Nothing about his absence is easy or will be easy. But I hope that we will all carry his kindness, curiosity, and compassion into our interactions with the world. I believe this is the best way to keep his memory and his spirit alive. So, as much as we are all capable of doing this evening, let's use this time to celebrate his memory. After all, nothing made him happier than gathering friends and loved ones in Locke. Thank you.
Hi, folks. I'm Ted Farber, a longtime friend of James. There's so much to say when talking about my lifelong buddy, James Motlow. We met in 1964 at Camp Beaverbrook in Lake County. For those of you who don't know about Beaverbrook, it was a terrific and special summer camp where we arrived as adolescents and left as more responsible young men. James and I spent the summer atop Cobb Mountain, guided by Ami and Niha, which is Pomo for father and mother, where we performed all manner of chores, from dishwashing for 110 campers and staff, driving a 1946 Dodge pickup to the dump, and anything else our wonderful leaders needed. Oh, and yes, we did get into a bit of mischief now and then. James, usually the lead and I the follower, did such antics as jumping in the lake at 6 a.m. with a polar bear club, of which we were not members, or downhill skiing on dirt in the surrounding hillsides, or best of all, following the painting of the new tennis court we painted ourselves. After Beaverbrook, our paths diverged, but they were quite similar. Junior college, wife, kids, pets, the full catastrophe, as Zorba the Greek would say. I enjoyed visits to Locke, spending time with James' mother also. Captain James took me on the bay to experience his expert navigating skills, a most stressful and demanding responsibility he often referred to in his later years. I realized the stress it had on him. His retirement at Locke brought our friendship to a more intimate level. In 2011, James met Max and I met my future wife, Lois. We started spending time together, the four of us, whether in person or James and I on long telephone calls. Those calls became a highlight of my week. I learned what a deep thinker James was and I marveled at his knowledge and philosophical approach to life. I am missing that Saturday morning called today, instead of having to say my final farewell. James has always struck me as a very healthy and physical guy, certainly surpassing my activity level. I was shocked to the core when I learned of his sudden passing this week. He had become a soul brother to me, having a very special place in my life and my heart. When Lois and I were married 3 years ago in Sonoma, we asked James if he would be our wedding photographer. Weddings were not his wheelhouse, but he jumped at the chance to memorialize our special day. We see his image scrolls on our digital photo frame, always remembering that wonderful day in his with his talented imprint on it. For that, we are eternally grateful, and he will remain as everlasting part of our lives, never to be forgotten. Sword of the angels, old buddy. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Russell. I've lived in Locke since 1973 when I drove in with my ex-wife Sally, and I met James in July of 1973. And he invited us to stay behind his house right over there, and we set up a tent. And we lived in the tent for maybe 2 or 3 weeks until we found a place to live. It was kind of a great time. Everyone was, we consider ourselves retired. We've talked about it. We were all retired. We didn't have jobs. We would work occasionally in the fields, not the field, but there was a packing shed, and the whole town would go there and take over a pear sizer. And James was always the dumper. He dumped the pears, and everybody else would push pear bins around. It was kind of fun. I had so many stories. I don't know where to begin. I hardly believe he's gone. I've had almost 50 years in my brain where he's there, and now I look out in this current light, and he's not there. So, but he was we had so many conversations. He left Locke right around 1978, and he went to the Bay Area and created a whole nother life there. And I saw him on occasion. I would go to Thanksgiving, so I knew him, and I've always kept in contact with him. But it really wasn't until 2012 when he retired and he moved back to Locke. And he always wanted to live in that house over there. And he had actually given Connie King, the owner of the house, a $100 bill to hold the house for him. Well, Connie was like, "What do you mean $100? Here, take your money back. I'm not going to be held to this." So we ended up, my partner and I, Deborah, she bought the building from the parents, and actually the son and the daughter. So he moved in. So he's been living right there with us since 2012. And so we talk all the time. So I just talk and we talk and we talk. And, it's amazing, One funny story, back in 1974, we were all drinking. That's what we did. We drank well, and owls kept us. I think we supported owls, or owls supported us. I forget. And I remember one day I'm sitting there drinking away, and James just met this guy, and he's telling this guy, "I'm a famous artist, and I live here, and I'm a photographer." And I'm going, wait, what's anyway? So James leaves. This guy's friends comes up, and he goes to his friends. "I just met this famous artist named James Motlow." I'm going, "Is that how it works? I mean, I got to learn this a little better." So I'm going to miss him. Of course, I don't even know if I miss him yet, because he's so present in my life. As I said, I saw him every morning. He'd come into my house at 11 o'clock, and we'd talk for an hour or two and debate the world. And I mean, there was a lot to debate in these last couple of years. So I will miss him, and hopefully one day I will know him differently. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers.
Hands are a little wet now, so wipe them off. Okay, I'm going to read sort of a succinct version of the preface from my dad's book. He wrote this with Jeff Gillenkirk, and I think that it shows the person that he was and also how he came to be part of the Locke community. Hopefully this won't take too long. In 1971, I stopped to visit a friend in Locke on my way to San Francisco. To my surprise, he was planning on leaving and offered me his place on Main Street to rent. I'd been looking for a place in the country for a long time, for a home away from Sacramento and its white bread, middle America culture. I was looking for a refuge, a retreat, a place to study and practice my photography. So on a whim and instinct, I rented his place that day. It was a decision that would affect my life right up to the present day. It wasn't long, however, before I discovered that I was one of only 3 or 4 non-Chinese living in Locke. Locke was a town like no other, a wide-open Chinese Western town, and as a non-Chinese living there, I wasn't accepted right away. Out on Main Street, I found my neighbors would pass me by with the same cold avoidance they showed to other whites. I found myself caught between a culture I did not accept and one that seemed unwilling to accept me, which was all right with me. Being in the country, in a small town, and on my own was right where I wanted to be. I was 22 years old. I would sit out on the porch of my house and watch, amazed by almost everything I saw. Their town, so small, so poor, yet so orderly beneath a collapsing facade. I had my own garden, and I made it a point every morning to wave hello to my neighbors. I usually received a nod, sometimes a wave in return, though little more. Certainly I made no attempt to photograph them at this time. I didn't feel close enough or accepted enough even to ask them for that privilege. Instead, I began exploring and photographing subjects in the Delta and California's nearby Central Valley, pursuing my main photographic interest of people and places, how they fit together, or how they didn't. And every night I returned home to my little house in the peaceful town by the river. Then one morning that summer, my life in Locke changed for good, when my most diminutive neighbor, Mrs. Leong, stopped me in the street. In extremely difficult English, she asked me to fix her toilet, and of course I said yes, though I didn't know exactly what was in store for me. It took me more than a week to replace the rotten wood in the floor, the toilet, and the broken plumbing. For compensation, Mrs. Leong fixed dinner for me almost every night that week. Even though she spoke hardly any English and I no Chinese whatsoever, we were able to communicate with gestures, facial expressions, intuition, and laughter. I usually brought my camera with me and continually asked her and her husband if I could take their pictures. These shy, elderly, Chinese-born farm workers always refused. Until one afternoon, several months after I'd finished repairing Mrs. Leong's bathroom, I was returning home with a bunch of roses I'd picked for someone, and found her talking with a friend on her front porch. I spontaneously handed those roses to Mrs. Leong, an act which instantly pleased her. She smiled broadly, then pointed to my camera and asked me if I wanted to take her picture. Of course I did. This was the first cooperative portrait I ever took of any of my neighbors in Locke. My experience with Mrs. Leong, working for her, sharing her meals, and her agreement to be photographed, carried me across some kind of invisible barrier with the other townspeople as well. Over the next several months, other neighbors agreed to be photographed. I had my camera in hand whenever I left the house, and simply followed my intuition and photographed whatever moved me. I fell in love with this funny, falling down town and its acres of flowering pear orchards, the confluences of dark river waters at the front and back of town, its gardens and fences and fruit trees, its unusual people. And that's all. We would very much like anyone who wants to share a memory of Dad to come up here. We have a couple other people who have already told us that they would like to speak, and they're welcome to come up, but we want to extend it beyond that as well. We know there are people here from a lot of different parts of Dad's life who knew him, and we would love to hear from you, so please don't be shy. Thank you.
I was at a time in my life when I chose to decide, do I want love in my life again or not? My answer was yes. On a trip to the snow, I wrote a letter to the universe, listing the qualities I needed in a partner. The first thing I wanted was someone who could make me laugh. Then someone who was loving, kind-hearted, physically affectionate, artistic, knew who he was, had good communication skills, and someone who could stand up to me with love and kindness when I got difficult. I then burned the letter, sending my message to the ethers. About a year later, my sister Montserrat saw James at a party in Walnut Grove and presciently thought, that man is for my sister. In due time, after learning more about him from mutual friends here in Locke, she told us about each other, and a date was set for us to meet. James was a senior captain with the Blue and Gold Fleet in San Francisco. He invited us to join him for lunch in his wheelhouse as he took a boatload of tourists out on the bay around Alcatraz. My sister and Jeep made a beautiful exotic meal and infused it with magic love voodoo. We were standing in line with other passengers. My sister suddenly said, "Here comes his boat. There he is." And he saw us, and he vigorously waved at us, and his beautiful silver hair was blowing in the wind. He wore a white shirt with gold epaulets. I thought, I think I see the appeal of a man in uniform, especially in a white shirt. My sister started fussing over me, checking my lipstick. She turned to the woman behind us who was noticing all the fuss, and she said, "My sister has a date with the captain." We all laughed, and before we knew it, James was standing in front of me, ready to give me a hug. I wanted to hug him back and said, I'm sorry, but my hands are full of lotion and are still a bit wet. With a giant grin, he said, "Oh, I love grease." That was our beginning. I have been blessed for 13 years with the most amazing person I have ever known, with a kind of love I have never known, and many wonderful adventures together. James loved life. He loved people unconditionally, without judgment, just the way they were, and deeply cared about them. He loved Locke and his community. He never hesitated to help anyone in need in any way he could. He loved his children, Wesley and Mary Sophia, and was so proud of them. He was a deep thinker, a searcher, an avid reader, a man of many interests and talents. He was good at everything he did while overcoming many obstacles. He lived every moment to its fullest. One of his favorite things to do was to sit outside at dusk, right over there, and watch the clouds. He talked to me every day about how beautiful the clouds were. He loved the Delta breeze and skinny dipping in his kiddie pool in the summer at night before going to bed to stay cool. He brought me coffee and breakfast in bed almost every day. He loved to cook and feed people. When apart, we spoke on the phone 2 to 3 times per day. Some days, he was my backup alarm clock when I had to go to work. He would let me sleep in a few extra minutes without hanging up. When I asked him what he did during those minutes, he said he just loved to listen to me breathe. I sleep with one of his shirts now, and I breathe in his essence. It brings me great comfort. He was my teacher, and he will always be by my side, in my heart, in my being. I want to be more like James. I will walk in his size 13 slippers, my Sasquatch, my big-footed love goofball twin flame. I love you, baby.
That was wonderful. I hope that was recorded. My name is Stuart Walthall. I'm a Locke resident. I'm a longtime friend of James's. I'm not going to try to top something like that and no doubt what's coming forthwith. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the Locke Foundation. I've had the pleasure of working with James very closely these last few months. The Locke Foundation is a nonprofit whose mission is to educate the public about the history and the culture and the legacy of Locke. The foundation runs the museum. My goodness, and we have a scholarship program and blah, blah, blah. The important thing is the Locke Foundation is really the only organization that's advocating for the town of Locke. There is the Locke Management Association that deals with all the headaches of trying to take care of the maintenance of the town, but Locke Foundation is to gather and preserve, ultimately display our history. And working with James has been amazing. We all know about Bitter Melon. That is a legacy in itself. But I've been fortunate enough to work with James recently on the Locke Building Survey, where James had photographed in color for the first time all four sides of all historic buildings in this town, which we're going to be able to offer to the public, scholastic institutions, authors, etc. James's passions seem to come back again regarding this town. I don't know if you all know this, but Locke is the largest, most complete example of a rural agricultural Chinese American community in North America. And James realized the national significance of a place like this, much more than even a lot of people that live in this town. It is just a blessing to be able to work with a man like James Motlow, who not only had the talent to capture this, but to carry it forward. So all I'm going to say here is that the cliche about it left a hole in our lives, he won't be replaced, that's no bullshit. There's never going to be someone like James Motlow that especially the Locke Foundation is going to be able to replace. And I thank goodness for everything that he's already done. So thank you for hearing me out.
Hi. I thought I'd better do this before I have another glass of wine. My name's Sandy. I've been coming and going from the Delta for a very long time. And one day I was at a art fair, and a lot of us were there. And James was swinging this girl on a tree. And I looked at him, and I didn't know him. And I looked at her, and I didn't know her either. And I said, there's two people my age in love. And that was the first time I had ever seen them together. So I want to say what she said, I witnessed the first time I saw them together as a couple. Eventually I would become James's neighbor. I lived there and he lives there. And what I'm about to say is very selfish. And I didn't know how selfish I was until Monday. So I arrived home Sunday night. James met me. He meets me all the time. Says hello. He's got golfing. He's got a little pool. He's got everything going on there on the corner, and he greets everybody. But to me, he made me feel like I had a sense of belonging. And for that, I thank him. And then for the next 3 days, I came home and he was there and he greeted me and said hello and how's things going and asked me how I was, and and that's what he did. He cared. He cared. And he cared so much, that I said to him, how are you? And he said, I'm great. I couldn't be better. He said, the world's treating me wonderful. My kids are great. My son's going off. My kids are wonderful. I said, how's everything else? And he said, my relationship is great. He said, everything is great. He said, truly, he looked right in my eyes and he said, I couldn't ask for more. And I believed him. And the next morning, we were standing out here and he waved on the way to the post office. And then what I realized was how selfish I was. That man was so kind. He was so kind. I don't know if I've known anybody that cared about the slightest thing and made it important to me. So the next 3 days after that, I had fear that he wasn't going to greet me, and how was I going to deal with that? But I think I learned a lesson from him. Kindness is in our pocket. And he's teaching us all that tonight. And I think we all feel that. And I could go on and on and on, and I won't. But I got to tell you, I'm going to miss him. And I do know from my own losses that he's right there with us. So thank you for hearing me out. Thank you.
I always said that a man's defined by his family and friends, especially at a moment like this. And this is really, really special because hard to believe that James passed away on Monday and here we are on Saturday and we're all together. I'm Alex Ng. I'm representing the Chinese American Council, but basically I'm here representing my wife and myself, Joyce. Let me go back a little bit. I've heard about Locke for quite a while, back in the 80s, and we came here in 1971. I've heard about Locke, and we visited a couple of times, and as I began my community work, I realized that we needed to have something, an organization to preserve the history and culture of the town. And so the Board of Supervisors, Sacramento Board of Supervisors, in its infinite wisdom, in 1999, when the sewer system was failing, came up with a plan to redo the sewer system. And they also established a structure for the LMA. They established 3 Chinese American organizations. One of them was the Chinese American Council of Sacramento, which was founded by Frank Fatt. We've always had an interest. It was our main interest to preserve the history of Locke, to get involved with the preservation of the history. I had the misfortune of meeting James Motlow late in life. But I was very impressed by Bitter Melon. I was impressed by what he and Jeff Gillenkamp did in terms of establishing a rapport with the community and establishing a rapport with all the Chinese in the area. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, even Chinese don't get along with Chinese, I'm afraid to say. You know how that is with Italians, right? But, when I first met Jeff had what we call Hosum. He had good heart. And you knew that from the outset. What he did and what he said, it exuded was compassion. That's something that you always remember about James. This is really fresh in my mind because Jeff, Frank Martinez, and I met only 6 days ago prior to James' passing, and his words are still fresh in my mind. But I consider it always a privilege to have known James Motlow. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So nice to see all these familiar faces and ones that I've never seen before, because I really wanted to meet a lot of James's contacts and friends and lifelong friends, because it's a whole part of James's life I never knew. But I was fortunate enough to meet James and Russell when we were in New Jersey at the time, and James would call often from California, and that's how I got to know him. I got to know him on the phone, and I could see how close they were and how, they were just such good buddies, and they just had such a strong connection, and it was wonderful to finally meet him when we moved back to California. But I've been thinking about all the things I'm reading on the internet and things that people have said and who James was to them, and I started to think, so who was he to me? And I had a hard time defining it, actually. I started to think, well, he's a friend. Well, that's not good enough, really. A brother. I grew up with 5 sisters, so I don't even know what a brother is like. So I was like, I guess that's what he was like, what a brother is. Family. Certainly family. A confidant. Russell doesn't know how many times I went to James's porch and said, so was he like this back in the day? When you were all, tell me who he was then, because who is this guy, that kind of thing. But he was just a gem, and everybody here knows that. And before I want to say something funny first, which is, this is how James inspired me. When he moved into Connie's house, there's a little toilet closet right off the laundry room. It's just a toilet. It was big enough for Connie King. I don't even know if James could sit in there. It's so small. But many times going over to James's for dinner, I'd use that toilet. And I closed the door one day, and I thought, I got to do this. So I went back into his study, I grabbed a Sharpie, and I scribbled on the inside of his bathroom wall, for a good time, call James Motlow, 916-776, blah, 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 whatever his landline was then. And, I don't even know if he mentioned it to me. I don't even know if sure, he must have seen it a million times, yeah. And then I do want to tell everyone that, fortunately, small town, Walnut Grove Post Office called Russell and I immediately, and we got up there. And he was surrounded with paramedics and the firemen and everything. And I just felt, once they had made their best efforts, I just wanted someone who loved him dearly, as you all do, to give him a kiss goodbye. And I did that for everyone. I just knelt on the floor, kissed his forehead, and did that for you. That's how I felt. I've never done anything like that in my life. I've never kissed someone who has passed or anything like that, but somehow that just seemed right for James. And that's about it.
Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see everyone in this celebration of life.
We're here because of James Motlow, and he's a big person in our heart, so we do miss him. For all of you, Locke is a special place. It's special because Bitter Melon, through James Motlow's perspective, his eyes, stories through Jeff Gillenkirk, they put us on the map. They get people here to visit Locke. We are a National Historical Landmark, and very proud of our National Historical Landmark. The Chinese came here in the 1861 Swamp Land Act. For the next 20 years, they've actually reclaimed over 88,000 acres of land, so it's fertile soil, fertile land. And James was able to capture some of the histories of the descendants who lived here. And so, Mason, you read some of the preface of Bitter Melon. I like to follow through and read some of the excerpts that I think are really key to what James' contribution to helping Locke. America must have been like a bitter melon for these Chinese who came here experiencing riches, respect, and triumph returned to their home country, and instead encountered segregation, poverty, widespread discrimination. Yes, they persevered, indeed, considering the strength of the spirits of those who survived and the prosperity of their offspring. They have prevailed. They've carved their niche in the Gold Mountain, and patiently persevering and draw nourishment and even happiness from the melon that first seemed to promise them only bitterness. So Bitter Melon, so befitting that James had named his book Bitter Melon because of the preservation of the Chinese who settled in this area. And he writes at the end there, "My deepest thanks go to the people of Locke. It is my hope that publication of Bitter Melon will help the American people gain knowledge, understanding of the strength, resourcefulness, and character of California's Chinese pioneers, and greater respect for their descendants living among us today." So that's James Motlow. Friend, neighbor, he's always been so helpful, and I know I will miss him because we did tours together. We do educational tours of the town of Locke, and the last tour that we were involved with together was a group of seniors from the Pioneer Housing Complex in North Sacramento area. So his passion in telling the story about Locke, the community, he is so knowledgeable. He's knowledgeable because everything that has been absorbed and living in the space that is so beautiful to him, he's communicated that through his heart to everyone, and it shows in the deep relationships for those that are here and those that have known him so closely.
Good afternoon. My name is D.R. Wagner. I've been a friend of James Motlow for over 50 years. And I told my daughters that. I said, James has been my friend for over 50 years. And they said, yeah. And I said, you have no idea what that means. You haven't even lived 50 years. So after you've lived 50 years, you'll know what that means to have somebody that's that close. I met James's mother before I met him when she was on the River Road Gallery. I played with a band that played down here in what's now the Lock Garden. It was called the Toolies then. It was a pizza place. We made music down here. I hung around with James when he lived at various locations in Lock, and he imbued in me a great love for this town and for the Delta overall. And after spending over 30 years teaching at the University of California at Davis, in the design department, I had the opportunity. I called James up one night and I said, James, I want to move to Luck. And he said, I don't believe it. He said, you couldn't have called at a better time. Just last night, a space became available. And the spaces do not become available in Luck. It's everyone that comes out here goes, oh, I want to live here. Do you really? Do you really? You know, we don't have a gas station. We don't have a grocery store. But we've got the most wonderful people that I've ever met. I've been here, lived here since I retired, almost 10 years. I'm a poet and a musician and a visual artist, and have been in that area of activity all my life. At one point, I hired James to do a photo essay of Sacramento's Chicano community. And it was the first time anybody had done anything like that. And the city of Sacramento helped sponsor it through the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. I was in charge of all of the artists that they hired. And James's documentation of that is certainly equal to what he did with the town of Locke. He brought the people of the Washington community into the spotlight, and we wound up working together on a number of other projects. For a while, I had, crazy that I had 5 galleries going, all nonprofit, and one of them was at the Housing and Community Development Department in Sacramento, and we did a Delta show, and we showed what they called at that time Class K housing, which was housing that the hippies built. That didn't come up to code, but they were the most charming things you've ever seen. They were great. I had great admiration for what they did, and James helped me get the people together to present in the show, and we presented 3 or 4 very, very well-known photographers for that. We managed to stay close. He went down to San Francisco, of course, and was a captain on a ship. And when he came back, we struck it up really very quickly again. And I've been out here going on 10 years now. Since I retired from UC Davis, I continue to write poetry and make music as I am able. And I wanted to read just a poem. Now this isn't about James. This is just how I was feeling after I heard that he died, after it settled in, and I was thinking about another American poet named Wallace Stevens, who I greatly admire. And this poem came through as one that needed to be said. So, indulge me. It's called A Possibility of Breath. This space between here and the clouds seems careless, but for fleeting beauty and a wharf for docking weary eyes to something not covered with the dust. A dreamt majesty that doesn't stare, but remains an argument that there is a sweet, staring distance between all things. Waking as we do from whatever uncertain depths we direct ourselves in so-called sleep, we find the wide heaven, the sparkling haven where we no longer need to make choices, but use the energy we have gathered to quell time's complaints about everything that is not dead, forgetting even our own names, living here without bodies to see, the low owl plummet, rising of the morning. Thank you for indulging me. Thank you, James. That was beautiful, and all of you were beautiful. I'm Steve, and this is Earl, and we wanted to fill you in about another part of James's life, and that's working on the bay on the ferry. We're former co-workers of his, and
the salty part.
Yeah. Everything every one of you has said about James is true, absolutely true, and it extended to how he related to all of us. James was a friend, he was a mentor, and he was very patient with those of us who had steep learning curves, especially me when I tried to learn how to drive a ferry, stepping up from being a deckhand. And it's not for lack of trying. James did his best, but I just wasn't qualified enough to do that. However, one of my coworkers, a fellow named Gene, referred to him as Obi-Wan. And it's true, because he was trying to teach me how to drive a Bay Cruise boat into the dock at Pier 39, which is no easy task. And it's the only time I've ever seen a captain drive a boat with 3 hands. He would use both of his hands and his hip to steer the boat into the dock. And he was good at it. And he was very patient with me, but I just didn't have the stuff. But I don't blame James for that. James was also known as Captain Happy. He would call vessel traffic, and I worked on other ferries like the Vallejo ferry, where deckhands would stand watches with the captain. And you could tell it was James because he would always call in a chipper voice, even when he was driving Alcatraz on a 10 or 11 and a quarter hour shift. And the Alcatraz run was a grind. It was a boat every 30 minutes, there and back again, carrying 360 passengers. All day long, he'd call traffic in that chipper, happy voice of his, and it never wavered. It wouldn't wear him down. That was James. He was a source of quiet strength. And one last thing I'll say about him, which really I thought was just shows what a wonderful human being he was. In 2005, we lost the Alcatraz contract, and it was awarded to Hornblower, and there's a long story behind that. A lot of us tried to get hired there, and Hornblower said we weren't qualified. James wrote a letter to the editor of various newspapers saying, "I've never met a more qualified group of people. Hornblower doesn't know what they're missing." That was James.
I first met him around 1980. That's about 40 years ago, I guess. 42 years ago. We were deckhands together on one of the boats. It was one cruise in particular I can remember. He was a cool, calm, calculating person that knew exactly what to do when a riot broke out on the boat. The boat, I don't know if you've heard this story, but the boat ended up on the dock. The door opened up. The riot spilled out onto the dock. They continued to riot. He was up on the top of the boat with a garden hose, just spraying them all down. I don't know if it slowed him down very much, but the sirens in the distance did, and they all scooted out after that. But I really enjoyed working with him. He was a wonderful deckhand. I learned a lot from him. He was very expert at what he did. Then when he became a captain, he was also very good at that. And I think he took some of the hardest shifts on some of the most difficult runs on the bay. A lot of people didn't want that, but he did a great job of it. But I still remember talking to him even after I quit being a deckhand and had my own boat business. I saw him almost every day, and I'd say hi and we'd talk, and was a wonderful guy. I'll miss him.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Klein-Sasser, and Jeff Gillenkirk was my partner. And as many of you may know, they died in an incredibly similar way, very suddenly and very shockingly and way too soon. And what Jeff learned from James is really inestimable. He was a model for how to be a good man that Jeff tried very hard to follow, a man with a true golden heart. And when I met James, that's sort of when I decided I loved Jeff, because I felt like if you have a friend like this who loves you like this, then that says, it says worlds about you. And they were really like brothers. And Lucas Gillenkirk, who's here, back here somewhere, was like a nephew to him. And they called each other Yim and Yef. And that were their nicknames. And after Jeff died, I found that all of his passwords were Uncle Yim. And so it was like he was very much, he was just with him all the time. And when he died, Max and James were among the first people at my house. I don't even know how you got there as fast as you did, but you did. And of course with Lucas there and my daughter and all of us in total shock. And James made it clear to me that even though Jeff was his friend first, he would be my friend for life. And he was. And he never stopped supporting me. He was there, always reminding me of the joy and hope of going forward, and carried Jeff's memory so beautifully. What they really shared that I so respect is a commitment to history and the importance of history and the importance of making history real and alive, especially in this historyless moment that we live in, where context is often forgotten and empathy and compassion and what has come before isn't always remembered. And they truly believed in that, really joyfully, and they also believed in doing it with art, through art. And James expressed visually in writing with this enthusiasm that is how you can really communicate with people, is through art. And I would call what he did love-infused art, joy-infused art. And that was an inspiration to everyone who knew him. So I truly do believe that Jeff was up there waiting, saying, Yim, get over here. I got a martini waiting for you, dude. Thanks.
So happy to see so many people here. My name is Montserrat, for those who don't know me. And my sister is Max, James's partner. And I think we've said so many things about James today, all of which are incredibly true. And I just want to say, I've never known anybody who was as solid as he was, but also a complete goofball. And he could, you could talk to him and he would look right at you and he would be totally with you. It's a very unique and rare characteristic to have. And I just don't know how he was able to hold that and do that on this earth, and the loving power that came from him. And he was like my brother. I talked to him almost every week. I don't know that you know that, Lala. But we shared this person that we both love, and I cannot believe that he's gone. The one thing I also know is James Motlow loved women, in particular my sister. And in honor of that, I risked my life last night to bring him gallons of naked lady lilies. So, James, I want to send you off with all these naked ladies. Thank you.
It's so wonderful to see everyone. I'm Alice Anderson, and I was brought back to Locke by my bestie, D.R. Wagner. We're both writers, And it was such an honor. If you know Locke, you know that there is the inside Locke, right? The people who live here and keep it going and keep the legacy going and tell the stories. And then there is an outer circle of those of us who absolutely adore Locke, adore everything about it. And we're the people that, want to move into Locke, right? We're like, I gotta find my chance, right? So I first came to Locke. My family moved from the Mississippi Delta in 1976. And my mother had given my father an ultimatum. She said, we're leaving Mississippi or I'm leaving without you. And so my father convinced her we would move to California. Of course, she thought, oh, beaches and, all of that. Instead, we moved to South Sacramento. And we moved to Greenhaven Lake. Our house was the second house built, if you know Greenhaven, on the lake. So it was very rural at that time. And my father was a huge gambler. And so I first came to Locke in the 70s. We moved in 76 because I was my father's cover for gambling. So he would say, well, Alice and me are going down to do A or B or this or that or something at the church. But really, he would come down to the Delta. His best friend lived in Ileton, and he would gamble. And he would tell me to bring a book and to entertain myself. Well, one night, he was in Locke. I don't know where he was. And I was reading as the sun was going down and that beautiful Delta breeze that James loves so much was blowing. I just felt it again. It felt like a hug from James. I think I'll always think of it that way. And my father didn't come back. He usually would come back after a few hours, but I waited and it got later and later. And, I just sort of hid out on a porch that I found in Locke. And so when DR he moved to Locke and he brought me with him, and I connected with all these wonderful people. And because I'm a writer, I'm working on a novel. And I said to James, the novel is set in 1976 because it stayed in my imagination all this time. And I said to James, can you tell me some stories about Locke? And he told me about terrible fights on Main Street and, the people that he had photographed and his friends and all these beautiful stories. And it was one of those perfect Locke days where we started out, Russell was kind enough to let my children make some boards, and then James barbecued, the master barbecuer of Locke, for us. We all brought food, and then we sat around the fire, and he told me many of these stories. Well, at the end of the night, I had stuff to take back to my car. I brought a big platter of food and some other things, and DR had given me some books, and James said, oh, let me help you to your car. And I'll never forget that moment standing with James and thanking him for telling me these early stories of his life in Locke. And I have had this character in my novel. I think I've changed his name 422 times. I never know who this mysterious man is. And the other morning I woke up and I just thought, it's James. It's James. And so I started to write into that. But that night I thanked him. I said, these stories are just magic to me, to a girl who came here in the 70s and was just captured. And he said, well, Locke is magic. Locke is like the whole world in one small town. And he said, but how did you come to Locke in the 70s? And I told him about this night that my father had kind of abandoned me late at night in Locke. And he said, you're the girl. And it was then I realized that this man, I was probably 13 at the time, who had come and sat with me for hours and just chatted and talked until my father finally came, was James. We'll miss him. Thank you.
Hi. For those of you I've never met, my name is Adrienne. I've known James since 1984. I've known Yim, and I've known Obi-Wan, and the Tai Chi guy, and the other iterations that people have talked about. And the last time I saw him was, I don't know, maybe a month ago, right there. And we had a similar conversation that we've had 100 times, and it inspires me every time we have it, and I hope that it inspires you. And it was just, how you doing, James? And he said, I'm doing great. I'm so grateful. And he'd always have 2 or 3 things he'd just say he was so grateful for. And even during COVID, he was like, I'm so grateful we're out here. And the last time I saw him, that's what he said. I'm just so grateful. He said, I'm so glad to be here. I'm just so happy I'm still here, or I'm glad to be here. And I was up in Locke one more time, and I usually always stop in to see him just for a minute anyway when I'm here. And I didn't. And my thought was, I want to remember him just like that, just like he was the last time I saw him. That was my thought. And if you're taking any inspiration from this marvelous character that we're all expressing parts of, I would encourage you to just list your gratefuls. Just often list your gratefuls and live with them and keep them alive and before you and share them, because that's what James did.
I'm wearing this shirt in honor of James because he always had some kind of Hawaiian shirt on. He's always felt like he was ready to party. And that's who he was. I'm kind of a James newbie. I probably only known him about 10 years. My name's Nora. And I fell in love with him the minute I met him. But I'm a lesbian, so I couldn't really, make it happen. But I loved his soul. And I loved his spirit. And the thing about James, well, I got to golf with him once. I don't know, he was such a big golfer. And when he found out I golfed, he was like, let's go golfing. We're going to go to Bartley Kavanaugh. So I was like, okay. And I had the best game of my life with James. In fact, I think I beat him. And I think he was so gracious about it. And I never have played golf that well in my life. So the next time I came out to Locke, he has golf balls over here. You guys probably know that. And so he's like, yeah, we're just going to hit them out over there into the field, And so there we were hitting golf balls out into the field. And he was so wonderful. And the thing that I think every single one of us, we love James because he cared. He cared, and he heard you, and he saw you. And that is so rare in this world, when you talk to someone and they hear you and they see you and they love you and they care about you. I don't care if you know him, if you knew him for 1 minute, you will attest to that. You will say that is James Motlow. He was all about hearing you and seeing you and loving you. And so in that spirit, he doesn't want us sitting here and crying and all this. I want y'all to stand up and hug 3 people and look them in the eye and tell them in James's spirit that you love them and you care about them. All right, so let's do that, and then we'll end it up. I'm sure Stuart has a few more people that want to speak, but let's take a little hug break for James, okay? Thank you.
And my family, my mom, my sister, my youngest brother and I immigrated here back in 1969. And Mary was already here. And soon afterwards, we had the incredible opportunity to get to know James. And I'd like to think of James as this ever-present, effervescent kind of individual. He was exactly that. It's hard to imagine that Locke would continue without the presence, at least physical presence, of James, because he inspired and he was so much a part of all of our lives. And I know for my family and I had the privilege and honor of really having James mentor me and model the way for me as I worked with him and Jeff on the Bitter Melon book. And he called forward strength in the stories that I never even knew and understood in my own family, amongst my relatives, all of our neighbors and friends in Locke. And he had an incredible gift of that. He was the one that sat me down. I think I was maybe 19. And he and Jeff came to talk to me and said, you know, Connie, we think you're just the perfect person to help us in this project of Bitter Melon. And it's going to be an oral history. And I thought, what the hell is an oral history, you know? And why me? And I quickly understood really his important intentions, the way that he conducted himself, the way that I think all of you earlier described who knew him, how he interacted with all of us, right? He as an outsider, right? The white guy, he had a way of really relating to us as a neighbor, but as a human being. His own humility and humanity really was always him. And that's what I understood when I sat next to my neighbors, asking them questions that I never thought I could possibly ask my elders about. But James said, it's okay. Tell them you really need to understand those stories and that history, because this is a part of your history as well, and that you are here to absorb all of that and to retell it, right, to the world and help us retell it. And so really that project, I don't even call it a project, it was really a life's work that James and Jeff, right before his passing, really inspired in so many ways. And I will always forever be grateful that I had a small part in that, and that I was able to work alongside as a young'un, and, alongside these magnets, these creatives and talents that I thought, my Lordy, why am I doing here? What am I doing here? And it's really only since the last, I would say, 10, 12 years that I really understand, the impact of that. And James helped me with that, and helped, I think, our community, right, in Locke, and our Chinese community, to really understand the importance of that. And so I'm so grateful that all of you are gathered here to honor my brother. It's going to be really hard to not come back here and not see him, not get his huge bear hug, you know what I mean, right? And those twinkly eyes, just sort of like looking at you and touching you in such a real way, visceral way. And so I lost my own younger brother about 3 weeks ago. And it's just so hard to lose yet another one. But I know that Wesley, and so thank you for holding this community in this gathering so that we can say goodbye and to honor your incredible father. And James and I used to kid each other because he said, well, your mom brought me over another Costco chicken. I said, oh gosh, what did she have you fix this time? because it was that, right? It was just a matter of that was the humanity in him, you know. So I don't know how many chickens he took, you know, with him, but just know, James, that we are here, and it's because of you and because of your beauty and because of your love. Thank you.
I never once thought when I built this stage that it would be used for this. Just throwing that out there to you. I've known James off and on for a number of years, unfortunately more off than on. I had written a piece a few years ago based on a book written by the French philosopher Voltaire called Candide. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work. James was a great history freak, as I'm certain you guys might know. In the book, my beard's in the way. In the book Candide, Candide is struggling with life. He comes under the guidance of Professor Pangloss, who teaches everything is wonderful, period. And the book at the time was intended as a satire. It was deemed heretical, you know, all the church stuff and all that. And at the end of the book, Pangloss is deemed to be wrong. No one man can be this way. It's impossible. I hold events out here twice a year for my poetry books that I publish. And James barbecues out here for me. He's a great, beautiful soul. I so wanted to present this to him as a surprise. Unfortunately, I'm going to present it to him in spirit, and with all that I've heard here today, I hope that his friends can take this to heart, because when I first read Candide, I was in my early 20s. I have spent my entire life trying to answer that question. Was Voltaire right? Is it impossible to live like this? Or is it possible that a human being can live this way? I answered the question after knowing James, and the answer is yes. Absolutely yes. Panglossian. There is always more to you, more that you can do. It lies within you, locked away, waiting to come forth. There is no mystery needed, no further attachments either. Dig deep. Go beyond your fears, let go of expectations, and simply do. Give hope to those around you by doing what is true for you. Each day we are given the chance to know the greatness that exists within us all. Very few understand or acknowledge. James, you made me believe 40 years of trying to think Voltaire was right. It can't possibly be. And I mean, I hardly knew this guy like you guys did. I mean, there's proof. Good exists in the world, period. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Norm Spalding, and I was the dentist here in the Delta, off and on for almost 50 years. I first came here in 1976 to work in a clinic above the Central Market. It was I came once a month, and one of my first patients there was James Motlow. And he invited me to Locke. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I came and I sat there with him under his table. I think Russell must have been there, and maybe Stuart, I don't know. But he invited me, and he was just so welcoming and such a friend. He became my first friend here in the Delta, and he's the one that got me coming back to Locke. And in Locke and in James and Russell and Stuart, I found my community. So that's my appreciation. I think a lot of you are here because you met James walking through town, and he was always so friendly and so welcoming. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you, James. Thanks very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Min. I'm from San Jose. I may be the last one to know Uncle James passed away, because this morning I stepped in the visit center. I saw the announcement. I told myself, I won't cry for Uncle James. I'm so proud of him. About 4 years ago, I was working on my documentary, which is about Locke. And everybody talked to me, you should interview James Motlow, the writer of Peter Melon. Okay, so I was writing a letter, and I wrote a letter to James asking for an interview, and he quickly scheduled an interview in Mac's backyard in San Francisco. So I was very new filmmaker back then, and I carried my tripod, my camera, and I head to San Francisco. I did a so great interview in the backyard, Mac's backyard. And this guy inspired me so much about the history. And I can feel every word of love to Locke, to this land. So finally, I named my documentary, The Land of Luck, L-U-C-K, which refers to luck, this lucky place for all the people. But I was very new filmmaker back then, so I was shy to release this film, and I just thought I still need to work on it, keep on working it. But I just feel so uneasy when I try to share it with Uncle James first, and he gave me so encouraging feedback. So today I would let you know I will release my film shortly in name of Uncle James, to memorize him. Uncle James, I'm so proud of you, and we love this land because of you. Thank you so much.
My name is Carol Lee. I am with the Locke Foundation and with the Oral History Project. The last time I saw James was probably just a couple weeks ago, and in true James form, he was doing something again with telling the history of Locke and all that, but this time it was a little different. It was to educators, so it was basically educating educators about the Chinese American experience, and I was just a small part of it, but in being there and hearing him as he spoke to all these different people, you could see their eyes light up. You could hear the questions that they then insightfully asked because they got it, and it was because of James. So I think it was it wasn't his last thing, because even Saturday I spoke to someone else who said, yeah, he and I are going to be working on this project together, this joint thing. And so James was just always one of those people that's always thinking of something else to do for his beloved Locke. And so I've heard the word heart several times, and in Chinese, the word heart, the character for heart, actually looks kind of like a heart. And the word heart is in, for example, love. It's in the middle there. There is that character. There is also that character in the word memory. So if you just think something, that's one character. If you add the word heart, at the character for heart at the bottom, it's memory. And so in memory of James, he's in my heart and will always be. And I'm sure in yours as well. So thank you, James, and goodbye and hello in a different way. So, thank you.
I know I've already spoken, but I forgot to say a thing or two. The Locke Foundation is sponsoring a scholarship in the name of James Motlow to be presented to local high school seniors out here. And we're going to be doing it proudly. And I'm really glad. And this is going to go on in forever. And I didn't get to mention, too, about doing tours. People have touched on it. Hundreds of people get introduced to the town of Locke through tours. Historic tours that are sponsored by the Locke Foundation. People have come back and ask for James because he has such passion and knowledge and humor. He's just so fun to be around when he's in his element, and that's teaching people and helping people. So it's been quite a pleasure. James probably did 50% of all the tours of Locke. And I might add that he is not a director in the Locke Foundation. He did it because he liked doing it. So, anybody else going to come up here? Should I start just choosing people?
I could stand up here all day and tell you more. I'm not going to, but a couple of things. One is that we didn't have a clue of how this was going to go. So we borrowed 30 chairs from the Grand Island Mansion, like on Tuesday. There must be, well, how many people here? 150? 100? 4 times as many, maybe 5. So we invite you to share. And then I'm not going to ask her to come up and say much, but I would like to say there's a lady in the back that's standing next to Max, and she was the person at the post office. And she gave her all. So please turn around and praise this woman who gave had an experience of a lifetime and gave it all, and serves us all in the community, and we love her dearly. And so, honey, we liked you, okay? But now we have a deep love for you. And honey, honey, James was here before you. I thought you were, there's just a lot of things we're all learning about each other, so we all invite you up, okay?
Hello, my name is Russell Abraham, and I've known James since the 1970s. I'm a professional photographer in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've had a very full and prolific life in photography. And James and I were members of a photographic group in San Francisco called Jeroboam, which existed for maybe 5 or 10 years. And this was a group of photographers basically doing documentary work in California and around the world. And James and I became fast friends through that group. And he invited me up to Locke, and I came up here, and we spent a weekend together in Locke. And after we both got married and both moved to the Bay Area, we kept in touch, but our lives went on different paths, and I became a successful photographer, and he became a successful ferry boat captain. And we our paths really didn't cross until the last couple of years again, and we reestablished a friendship. But the reason I'm standing here right now is I want to talk about James as a photographer. James is brilliant. A lot of people pretend to be photographers. It's an easy thing to do. You don't need much talent. You don't need much insight. You aim the camera and focus it and push the button. But James brought to photography a lot more than that. And his photographs were brilliant. In that group of photographers, which was maybe 50 photographers, I counted him as, the top 3 guys in the group. He had vision. He had an eye. He had a passion for the art. And everything that he did was inspired. And there are a few photographers on this planet that I can say that about. And James was one of those guys. And it breaks my heart to hear about his passing, because we had plans to get together this month. But that's obviously not going to happen. But I just wanted to let you know that aside from being a wonderful human being, his art was exceptional. He was one of the best photographers I've ever known. And that's from someone who's done this for a really long time. Thank you.
Let's move this where I can reach you. Hi, my name is Karen Motlow, mother to Wesley Motlow and Mary Sophia Motlow, and I just wanted to honor their father by saying his true legacy are his children. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate so much all of the stories, sharing the memories, and just, this wonderful picture of our dad's life and a portrait of who he was that, we've all created by sharing today. And we just want to say, if you would like to continue to come up here and keep talking, you're welcome to do that, but please don't feel obligated to stay in your seats forever. We would love to get up and talk to more of you, so just don't feel plastered to your seats if you want to get up now. You want anything to add, Wes?
Yes, and please have some more food. I leave town tomorrow and cannot take all that food home with me, so please have some more food. And I also just wanted to thank everyone in town who helped put this event together. It really does take a village, so all of you know who you are, and it's amazing to have you in our lives, and thank you so much. And it's also amazing to have you all here. Thank you.